We want to thank our partner, AvaSure. Over 1,100 hospitals are using AvaSure's virtual care platform to engage with patients, optimize staffing, and seamlessly blend remote and in-person treatment at scale. Drive measurable outcomes and augment clinicians with an AI-powered solution that deeply integrates into your clinical workflows. AvaSure offers virtual care solutions supported by a secure, scalable infrastructure that helps you to lead your organization into a future where cutting-edge technology and compassionate care converge. For more information, check them out at thisweekhealth.com/AvaSure. Today on Newsday.
Make sure that organizations that health systems work with on pioneering AI are going to be around. We want to get away from wasteful spend. That means we need health tech vendors and health systems who have a view of the future that's not tied to a flash in the pan.
My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16-hospital system and creator of This Week Health, where we are dedicated to transforming healthcare one connection at a time. Newsday discusses the breaking news in healthcare with industry experts. Now, let's jump right in. All right, it's Newsday. Today I'm joined by Jacob Hansen, Chief Product Officer at AvaSure. Jacob, how's it going?
Doing well. Good to see you again, Bill.
Good to see you. I'm in the midst of waiting for this storm to hit. It's Wednesday. We were recording on a Wednesday. Don't worry, I'm in my office. I have hurricane-proof glass here, although I would say every about 30 minutes a tornado warning pops up on my phone. And yeah, for those who don't know, hurricanes lead to tornadoes. Anytime wind whips at that speed, sometimes it forms funnels. When it forms funnels, it gets really, really dangerous. So we've got that going on. Where do we find you? You're in your home office.
I'm home office this week, which is really nice. I'm in Salt Lake City. There are no pending hurricanes or tornadoes here.
What is the natural disaster for Salt Lake?
We got two core issues. One is we're on a fault line, so potential for earthquakes, although we don't get a lot of seismic activity, but we are on a big fault line here. And then our big issue is water, access to water, because we're in a high mountain desert. So that's every winter we hope for snow because we need it to get through the next year.
When I became CIO, all those years ago, I became aware of the disaster zones and what you can impact. One of the more interesting ones was Southern California. Obviously, we had seismic activity and water. You have the potential for tsunami. We were moving our data center to Las Vegas, so I had to research what are the things for Las Vegas. So Las Vegas is a desert as well. But the two I don't think people recognize, one is the trains that go by there taking radioactive material. That's a potential disaster if that would be caused by us. But the second I found fascinating because they're explaining to me, they're like, look, the most likely disaster here is a disaster in Southern California. And if there's a disaster in Southern California, what's going to happen is a huge migration of people are going to flock up here from Southern California into the Las Vegas area. And we see that as a significant risk factor. And there's going to be people who are lost their homes, significant mental damage has been done to them, and they're all of a sudden going to show up en masse into Las Vegas. And that's one of the disasters they think about and plan for in Las Vegas, which is, I had never thought about that before.
Yeah, same.
There's somebody somewhere in some little room going, what's the disaster for Topeka? And they come up with it and tell you what to do with it. We're not going to talk about disasters today. You have picked out 3 good stories here. We'll start with the Becker's story. AI is like tuition, Common Spirit CIO approach to AI hype. And so this is Daniel Barchi, and he drew the important distinction between AI and other essential areas of investment. Cybersecurity is like rent. You've got to pay it. There's no choice. Otherwise, you don't have shelter. AI is like tuition. We're learning. There are benefits, but you're investing in the future. Yeah, and he says he goes on, it's tempting to view AI as novel, disruptive technology. However, many health systems have been applying AI in their operations for years, sometimes without explicitly labeling it as such. Everybody wants to talk about AI. And if you go to any health system, we'll be like, yeah, we're doing that. Every one of us probably has 50 or more applied AI tools, not pilots, actually applied things that they're doing. It's embedded in our clinical systems. It's embedded in our sepsis. It's embedded in our radiology systems. Our data teams are using it. And we certainly have been doing RPA, robotic process automation, for years. And I think it's an interesting distinction. You selected this story. What are your thoughts on it?
This one really jumped off the page at me, only because we are a business that thinks so heavily about the intelligent virtual care platform that we deploy and all the innovation that's happening with AI on our platform as well, but the importance of connecting new AI with a program that has a strong, solid, provable, repeatable ROI. And I liked the article because I don't think he was suggesting that organizations shouldn't innovate. It's more that you've got to have a way to fund that innovation. You've got to know what to expect from it. And from our perspective at AvaSure, it's a heck of a lot easier to fund those innovative activities if that is tied to a broader platform that's got known quantifiable outcomes. And the other interesting lens to this is, boy, there are startups all over the place. In fact, one of the articles I noticed on your site, but I didn't choose, was about health systems focused on working with and even investing in startups. The other thing is the importance of making sure that organizations that health systems work with on pioneering AI are going to be around, right? We want to get away from wasteful spend. That means we need health tech vendors and health systems who have a view of the future that's not tied to a flash in the pan, that's not a focus on some short-term interesting thing to try, but where are we going to start from? What's our beachhead? And how do we layer things on top and try things with the knowledge that we're not going to burn out the fuse and be done?
It's kind of cliche to say that we're not looking for cool. We're not cool. Look at me. I'm not cool, clearly. But CIOs,
you're pretty cool.
well, CIOs aren't looking for cool. We're looking for, and you said it early on, you said it's projects that have ROI. And when people hear ROI, they immediately hear numbers and money, but it's not only numbers and money. It could be reduction in readmissions, could be reduction in sepsis, could be any number of clinical outcomes that are positive. And I think that's what I hear Daniel saying is we know that there's potential in this, and you don't have to convince us of the potential, but what you do have to convince us of is that it can solve specific problems that we are facing. It may someday completely change the paradigm for the delivery of care, and we believe that too. But we don't believe that time frame is a year or 2 years, although we're looking at it closely. But we do see 5 to 10 years, things that used to be done. The great example is ambient listening. So ambient listening, typically we were focused on creating that note. You hear it all the time. Oh my, it created the perfect note. Oh, it's a great note, and that kind of stuff. Now those players are moving well beyond that. And they're not only creating the note in multiple specialties, but they're also starting to take it all the way through to coding. And they're saying, hey, you know what? We can look at that note and determine what the best coding is. And you can speak into what those rules are. We're not trying to overcode here, but I mean, that supply chain for getting to the bill and getting the thing submitted now just shrunk significantly and gets automated, and intelligence gets added to it.
I was just going to say the same thing. You look at the areas where we got the most experience as an industry under our belts: rev cycle, radiology, medical imaging. But you take what you just said, as we start to connect the dots between digital scribe and dictation using ambient listening, and how that connects to documentation or the creation of structured data, which ties to a structured approach to billing, which leads to rev cycle. The more we connect those dots, the better off we'll be. But you look at how long those examples that he listed in the presentation have been around. Those have been working through the kinks for a very long period.
Especially sepsis, that's been well documented, the stumbles that Epic had in that area. Now, so you're with AvaSure. In the AI space, there's this belief that when you marry computer vision is a form of artificial intelligence, but with additional artificial intelligence that is going to be able to take those images, determine what's going on in those images, and then create action. That's the area that everyone's, okay, we're investing in the future. We're going to get all those cameras out there because we believe there's going to be a substantial change in the way care is delivered. And those cameras are going to be 100x return on investment in each one of those rooms. In your experience, is that how they're looking at it?
I would say yes, and it doesn't stop at a camera. When you think about devices in every room, and you think about camera, microphone, speaker, and then you tie that to integration engines, machine learning, think about, so for computer vision, that's all about either augmenting a human being or automating something away from needing specific human triage to get action to somebody else, right? You could automate staff rounding compliance. That's still got to go to somebody eventually so that a person goes to the room or a virtual caregiver connects to the room. On the ambient listening side, we're really excited because we are now collaborating with Oracle and NVIDIA and another organization called Quantify to create something we've been calling virtual concierge, basically a triaging mechanism at the bedside with ambient listening, a verbal interaction, an avatar on the screen. All of that only has value to the extent that it leads to action by somebody. Like they're bringing a blanket to the room, they're addressing questions about medication, they're finding out why the patient doesn't feel well, fixing the TV that doesn't work. All of it's got to lead to somebody doing something, but hopefully it's the highest value work being done by a human being when it comes to patient care.
This is a really interesting space. I'm glad you're coming on because as a chief product officer, you're entertaining those thoughts of what is the possibility and the use cases. I'm sure you're talking to a lot of people and getting a lot of different use cases. All right, we'll hit the next story. This one's Trillion Health report reveals troubling trends in U.S. healthcare, costs soaring, health declining. Unsustainable spending, stagnant life expectancy, rising mortality rates, worsening health is what we're seeing. You know what's interesting about these studies? I really don't put a lot of weight in the stagnant life expectancy. I don't expect it to go up to 100 years old. First of all, the people that are dying today didn't take care of their bodies 40 years ago, and there's almost nothing you can do about it. I have a personal trainer, and the personal trainer is working with a friend of mine. He's 80 something years old. And he's always complaining about, man, every time I see him, he hurts me. And so I said to the personal trainer, I was joking with him, I'm like, you always hurt him every time he comes. He goes, Bill, he hasn't stretched his hamstrings or his quads in 30 years. And he goes, the only way to loosen those up, even though he's 80, is to create some level of discomfort. And it's just not going to happen. So changing life expectancy is really a lagging metric of what did we do 30 years ago in healthcare? What did we do 40 years ago in healthcare? Or not even healthcare, in health. What were we telling people to eat when they were growing up? We were saying, hey, the four basic food groups. We were starting to put all sorts of preservatives into the food. And now all of a sudden we're like, hey, people are dying. Yeah, like we've learned a lot of stuff over those 40 years. Now, it's a lagging metric, and I don't know if it's a decade or whatever. I don't put a lot of weight in that, but I do put a lot of weight in the unsustainable spending category. That's one that really does concern me. We're still a source of personal bankruptcies in this country. I run across these stories when people hear that I'm in healthcare and I wear this hat with This Week Health on it. People will tell me their stories of personal bankruptcy or somebody in their immediate circle who's going through a bankruptcy. And the spending, the labor costs keep going up, the cost of our campuses keep going up, the cost of the technology keeps going up. These are the things that jumped out at me on this story. What are your thoughts on it?
A couple thoughts. One, to your point about life expectancy or even health trends, I think something we don't talk about a lot on the traditional or core healthcare side, but gets talked about a lot more often on the payer side of the equation is just individual accountability and responsibility for our own health outcomes.
Oh, come on. You're putting that on me?
I'm putting it on myself. I'm a middle-aged
true.
guy, out of shape, and I've got stuff to work on. But the thing that really captured my interest with this is, look, I've been working in healthcare a long time with health technology vendors. And from the very outset, the notion of helping take cost out of the equation to create an ROI, to reduce health system costs, has been part of the story for every business that I've worked with as an employer, as a consultant, for nearly 20 years. And yet we're doubling spend in healthcare, every 5 to 10 years, not taking any cost out. It's a little bit disheartening, but it does motivate a focus on the right things, which is if we as health technology companies are not starting with a baseline of, I can only create value for my shareholders, for the business's shareholders, if I am reducing health system spend in some sort of a significant way. It has to happen. We all have to have that focus. And then the other thing is, okay, for us, look, we're focused on inpatient acute. By the time they get there, they're pretty sick. But Sometimes I hear people talk about elements of a patient's experience in a hospital as soft benefits or soft ROI as opposed to hard ROI. But the thing that is going to change some of those more distant outcomes that were referenced in the article has to tie to how technology solutions send people home generally on the path to rehabilitation with no expectation that they're going to come back. So much of it's tied to labor and staffing and cost, but did it cut costs without some expectation that a week later somebody's going to be back? So just a good, maybe a wake up call, a reminder that everything we do as an industry needs to be tied to those kind of clinical
Yeah,
expectations.
Jacob, I love your insights there. I remember a conversation I had with the doctor. I caught him on a bad day. It's take this for what it's worth. But he was really frustrated with being a doctor. I'm like, you get to do so many good things. He goes, yeah, but he goes, are we really making a difference? He goes, I sent this person home today and they're just going to be back. They don't eat right. They live in a place that's not going to be conducive to healthy exercise and that kind of stuff. Their family's 1,000 miles away. They're lonely. They're whatever. He's just, there's so many factors outside of my control that determine this person's health. And he goes, and then there's other people I send out, and I know they're leaving here and going to In-N-Out Burger. And I just told them, you've got to cut down on this and whatever, but they're just going to keep doing those things. And on that day, that was very frustrating for that doctor. I'm sure if I caught him a week later, he'd have a positive story and say, no, I made a difference today. It feels better. But that day for him was like just frustrating. It's like, how do I have more of an impact outside of like when they walk out my door? How do I feel like I still have my arms around them? Like I'm putting my arm over their shoulder and saying, hey, I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to help you to make better decisions.
Both things can be true. They can feel like they're making a difference for many, but also be deeply frustrated. I have a good friend who's a PA, who was in the orthopedic space, and he got out of that line of work completely to move into more of a longevity focused, like consultative model of working with patients because he just felt like no matter how many times he talked to somebody, he could say, look, with the right diet, the right exercise, the right stretching program, you don't need surgery and you won't be back. Let's talk about that. And most of the patients were instead saying, I want the quick fix. Look, I just want my shoulder to feel better. It doesn't really matter. Let's just do the surgery. Super disheartening. So he literally left that work to focus on something different.
Yeah. All right. We're not going to do this last story justice, but we're going to hit it anyway. And it's the surging demand for energy with the rise of AI straining the power grid. And it says here, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft consume 4% of the US electricity. That's expected to double by 2030. I don't know if you saw this announcement. Did you see the announcement that they're planning to turn 3 Mile Island back on? I grew up in Pennsylvania, so I remember 3 Mile Island vividly because essentially they weren't sure this thing was going to spew dangerous materials into the air, and that was naturally just going to hover over the land that I was living in. And so Microsoft, in a partnership with, I don't remember the name of the electric company, but they are going to revitalize that whole plant. And the reason is to power their data center. Literally, they're going to fire up a nuclear generator to power all those data centers. Are we making enough progress with regard, in your reading and the stuff you're coming across, do you think we're making enough progress in terms of reducing the amount of energy that's required to generate this much compute? Or are we just going to, is this another one of those things that's just unsustainably, we're just going to continue to rise?
I don't know. But the thing that scares me about that article is I don't know if anybody knows. I don't know if there's a way to know if we're creating enough because the speed at which compute is growing and improving, the pace of developing new novel technologies to utilize that power, that computing power, and the continued move to cloud from traditional on-prem data center driven things, the debate over what needs to be in private cloud, what can really be in public cloud, what can be shared from a multi-tenant standpoint. You read that and all you can think is, whose job is it to sit down and wonder, in 10 years, do we have any way of hoping that the pace of creating power and even the geographic requirements of data centers can keep up with the demand that just our industry alone, ignoring all the others, is creating for this kind of infrastructure? And I think it's going to be interesting excited to have a front row seat to monitor as we create these new things. What if it is actually sustainable for the long haul?
Yeah, it would all be fine. Like we could use as much energy as we want as long as it was clean energy, right? If it was hydroelectric generating enough to run all the data centers, no one would be saying anything because it's, what's the big deal? But as this hurricane churns over the Gulf, being whipped up by the warming waters of the Gulf of Mexico, you sit there and go, 2 hurricanes in 1 week. And yeah, what are we talking about here? And at what point it really becomes a regulatory thing? Things don't change unless it's regulatory. Google, Amazon, and Microsoft can say all they want about, oh, we're conscious and whatever. I trust Apple, by the way, more than I trust those three. Because when Apple says, hey, we're going to reduce the footprint and stuff, I just bought the new phone and got the trade-in and stuff. And like the trade-in box they gave me uses so little cardboard to send a phone via mail. And I was like, they literally are investing in this stuff. They are looking at it. I don't know about these three. And
I don't know.
At least two of them are sponsors. So the reality is they're all publicly traded companies. Is their fiduciary responsibility more than good global citizen responsibility? And I just think it's going to take regulatory to say, look, there's some metric. By the way, I do know health systems are starting to look at this. I had a great conversation. It was led by Mike Pfeffer at Stanford. He started talking about sustainability, and UCSD was talking about, they had a really dynamic conversation of how we're going to measure this, how we're going to drive it down, what is really necessary from a compute standpoint, and putting some metrics in place for their cloud providers to say, we expect you to make progress in these areas if we're going to sign this contract. And so they are starting to put some things into their contracts to say this much renewable, this much progress towards a higher output of compute per each kilowatt you're putting into it. I will say it's only a handful of the academic medical centers right now that are really pushing this, but hopefully this will become more of a trend in the conversation.
We'll see where it goes. That's for sure. It should be interesting to watch.
Jacob, I did a lot of talking this time. I apologize. Next time, I'm going to make you do most of the talking.
Great to chat either way.
It could be the impending doom of the hurricane hitting and stuff. I want to get all the words out.
Stay safe.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And look forward to the next time we get together.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to Newsday. There's a lot happening in our industry, and while Newsday covers interesting stuff, another way to stay informed is by subscribing to our daily insights email, which delivers expertly curated health IT news straight to your inbox. Sign up at thisweekhealth.com/news. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.